This is John Kaiser in Vancouver, May 26, 2018 at the Metals Investor Forum. I am talking to Bill Morton, CEO of Lorraine Copper Corp. Bill, welcome to Vancouver.
Thank you very much, John. It's a pleasure.
Bill, your key play, the main reason I invited you is the Stardust project, which Sun Metals Corp has an option to acquire 100% of by spending over $6 million over the next while. And at the end of that, you will acquire 30% of Sun Metals, and hopefully you have a discovery there that attracts somebody big, which buys out the company. You guys are a historical sort of prospect generator. With that 30% stake you have, you would get whatever it is that Sun Metals gets bought out for. You probably dividend most of it out to your shareholders, keep some, and carry on in your role of this company being a sort of a copper optionality aggregator. Before I get on to your other two projects, what is it that you hope to see from this $5 million, 5,000 meters drilling that's going to happen this summer? What do you hope to accomplish? You already have a resource of about 3 million tons of pretty good rock value polymetallic mineralization. What do you want to see come out of this program by the fall?
First thing I'll just say is, just one addition to what we're going to get on the assumption this is successful, we will not only get 30% of the company, but we also will retain a 2% royalty on base metals, on precious metals, and a 1% royalty on base metals. So that adds another sort of coefficient as to how the thing might play out in the end. I bring that up only because I think if it was very successful, and these are sage players, it might spur an offer to take the company. So that's another way it could play. In terms of what I expect to accomplish this season with the $5 million budget that we've got, what we're telling people, or Sun Metals particularly, who are the official operators, we're doing the work, we're kind of the hired hands with respect to how that works right now. But they want to try and expand the current copper gold skarn resource from the approximately 3 million tons that you alluded to something closer to 10 million tons. That's probably quite an achievable objective, given that we think that the previous operators who had that resource commissioned kind of had it done a little bit ahead of time, meaning that a lot of intercepts are wide open, and therefore you shouldn't add it up until you have some idea of having some constraints on it. And it doesn't appear from everything that we've done that there were any constraints, they just added it up. So by targeting what seem to be logical areas where the resource is open, we're hoping that we can really turn it into something which has enough tonnage to realistically start being an economic entity. Beyond that, the project has so many other exemplary hits in the other zones that it's a lot of room for discovery on its own at the same time. And that's the way it'll end up playing. I know from prior experiences, no matter what, I or even Sun Metals will tell people at this point as we're initiating the program that there will be some variance from what we end up doing, and there will be some, I'd be awfully surprised if we don't end up with some somewhat unexpected significant intercepts stepping out in other areas where there's no resource, but there are very credible open-ended numbers. So.
Now your other project, which is of course the namesake, the Lorraine project, which was the reason you, I believe, were spun out from Eastfield, the mothership ages ago. That project was under option from under option by Teck for a long time. They now have 51%, but they elected not to increase their interest. The project's been quiet. You've got about 35 million tons of copper with some gold. Assuming that Teck really looked hard for finding something big and good, is there any room left for this?
no, there's lots of room left. And Tech Corporation had an agreement with us that would have allowed them to earn a bigger interest at one point, and you're right, they passed the date for that, and then we're locked in at a 51% interest. When that first happened, which was all the way back to 2008, they themselves were in rough shape, stock market-wise and everything. And then Fort Hills, as we've been told by them, just basically took most of their money. And so consequently, they haven't been very receptive to letting us assume their interest, although we've had discussions to do that. But at the same time, they value the thing, and they have not been willing to take a haircut on it. And in Toronto earlier this year, they did tell us they may mount a program there this year. And given that our focus is on the Stardust right now, I think that would be great, but I'm really not particularly thinking it's necessary for us to want too hard to have to spend money on this thing right now. I'd prefer not to be honest.
Now, Mount Milligan's a fairly large porphyry system. It's in that neighborhood. And you haven't found anything like that. But when we talked about this some time ago, you said, well, a better analog would be the Mount Poly operation, which was actually found after they put the initial deposit into production. And that production decision wasn't made likely. Can you help explain how it's more similar to Mount Poly than Mount Milligan?
First off, from a very technical perspective, it's called an alkalic porphyry. Okay, the analogs to that would include Mount Poly, Galore Creek, and the Cadia deposits owned by Newcrest in Australia. Slightly different mineralogy, and the mode of mineralization doesn't tend to grade off slowly. It's a very abrupt start and stop style of mineralization. And so what ends up happening is a whole series of deposits tend to happen, but you have to kind of fight to find them. And that was part of the problem, I think, Tech, when they got into this deal with us with respect to Lorraine, they forgot about the fact that this kind of a deposit is not easily sort of quickly identified and then confirmed with some widespread step-out drilling. It's good, you have to fight to establish the zones. A smaller group, I suspect that a very achievable objective would be to have a deposit with resources bigger than Mount Poly.
Okay. And that would be how many tons?
Well, even Tech Corporation has told us one day when we had a heated meeting about what they were doing, what we wanted to do, and they threw their hands up and said, look, we could spend all the budget in the area of the lower main zone and the main zone and the Bishop zone, we might come up with 100 million tons, and that doesn't work for us, and that was the end of the discussion. Myself, it made my day, because I realized, holy mackerel, there's a whole watershed of companies that if we had 100 million tons of material grading 0.5% copper and 1/3 of a gram of gold that has low stripping and reasonable access and good metallurgy would be all over us.
Last question. The OK project near Powell River, southwestern British Columbia, almost on tide water. What is the prospect that this will ever be developed? And even if there isn't, is there some aspect to this system where there could be maybe an underground mineable resource that would be easily to be permitted within driving distance of a town that's basically, I believe it's a logging or pulp and paper town?
Well, that's correct. I mean, although some people think that there's environmental pushback that will make this difficult, I'm not sure I totally agree. Powell River itself is very much a blue-collar town. The Catalyst Pulp Mill, which originally was a Macmillan Bloedel facility, sheds jobs annually. And this community is used to high-paid blue-collar jobs. They like the $100,000 a year paychecks. So their local community is surprisingly supportive. They do have some mining history because Texada Island is host to two of the largest limestone quarry operations in North America. And there is going to be some opposition. First Nations are They've not been problematic, but they haven't either necessarily been completely supportive either. You know, we've got all our permits, we've been able to hire some of them, and we're able to enjoy them to some degree because they are friendly. But, you know, it is the coast, and these are some issues that you're right. A lot of the mineralization is open-ended. There's 7 zones of it, and some of the mineralization is getting better at depth, and again, there's lots of opportunity just to see what exactly we have. I don't think it's insurmountable problems. Those are just some of the issues that we'd have to address.
I'm in Vancouver. I've been talking with Bill Morton. Thank you, Bill.
Thanks very much, John. It's been great.